This audio presentation of Hi Dad is brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction. Written by Herbert Ewing Duncan. Executive producers: Scottish Rite Grand Commander James D. Cole, 33rd degree. Grand Master of DeMolay John Sellars and DeMolay Grand Secretary Stephen E. Crane. Narrated and produced by Matt Bowers, 32nd degree. Consulting producer Dean Alban, 33rd degree. Hi Dad Book, copyright 1981. Audio recordings copyright 2023. All rights reserved. For information on how you can donate to support this audio serial, visit DeMolay.org. Chapter 4, I Do So Promise and Vow. In the 30s, Frank Land was asked in a radio interview how DeMolay differed from other youth organizations. He instantly replied, "It has a ritual." His answer, so quietly and quickly given, is still the inherent quality of the Order of DeMolay. It has pageantry and beauty. It affords the opportunity for participation in dramatic portrayal of heroic personalities. The degrees carry a challenge for every boy to grow into a better man and a better citizen. The teachings of virtues proven true in all generations become vital to each young man as he solemnly pledges himself to be faithful to those ideals by the token words, "I do so promise and vow." From the organizing meeting of March 1919 until midsummer, the new club of DeMolay grew with a championship baseball team led by Louis Lower as the pitcher and Ray Hedrick as the catcher. There were social activities, service projects, and formative plans for a band, a patrol, a drum corps, and a flag corps. But Land was not satisfied. His club needed something more. He talked to his friends during the day and in the evening with his wife, discussing every idea, every possible plan that might hold the organization more firmly together and give it something unique to promote, its growth. The plan he was seeking seemed to evade him. It was often so close, but time after time the dream vanished into the realm of vague ideas. Then, one evening in the Scottish Rite Temple, he saw his friend, Frank Marshall, and knew he had found the answer. Marshall was then well known in Kansas City as the drama and music critic of the Kansas City Journal. He had worked in his early days with William Allen White, nationally known editor of Emporia, Kansas, and now looked back at a brilliant career as reporter, editor, and poet. One of his sonnets had been received and placed in the Shakespeare Museum at Stratford-on-Avon, and he had been invited by the officials of Kansas City to write a poem to be placed in the cornerstone box of the rebuilt Convention Hall. This poem, reflecting the challenge of one century to another, was to be read when the cornerstone box was opened after 100 years had passed. It concluded with the lines, "But in our cup we drain no dry of rue, if we the patient stepping stones are made to better things for those in days to be." Land found Marshall slumped in a well-worn upholstered chair, the picture of a man at leisurely ease. The old newspaper man was dressed in his habitual careless manner. His suit out of press and hidden in the folds of an ample vest was a heavy gold watch chain sagging under the weight of a fraternal medallion. His upper lip sported a graying mustache and his chin a small goatee. From the left pocket of his coat, the latest copy of the journal projected to the point of slipping to the floor. No two men could have been as different in appearance as these two Franks. One immaculate, the other casual and completely indifferent as to dress and appearance. But each radiated a tremendous ability, a strength of character, and a devotion to idealism. Now at this chance meeting, neither man realized that before 24 hours were to pass, the outlined plan of the 2 degrees of DeMolay would be written to remain unchanged for 5 decades and more. Land walked toward him that evening, and Marshall half rose in greeting and then settling back into his chair said, "Sit down and tell me about this club for boys you are forming. Everything going smoothly? What's new?" "Well, the answer to the first question is that we are growing. The answer to what's new is not what you might expect. I have a new title. The boys call me Dad." They had been at a loss as to just what to call me. It seems they were reluctant to call me Frank because of our age difference and felt that Mr. Land was sort of formal. Louis Lower started calling me Dad, and the others followed. We are all pleased. I like it. The boys like it. Dad is just right. It carries respect and confidence, and I am proud to be so designated. Sounds good. Let's see. You are 28. I am 54. There is an age difference here, but I will join the younger set. What else, Dad, is new? There is a problem to be solved, and this is where you come in. I have been thinking of something to give our club a distinctive quality, and I think I have it. Frank, I want you to write a ritual for DeMolay. Now wait a minute, Dad. Hold on a bit. Why ask me? Because you are the best qualified man I know. You have been active in your fraternity at the University of Kansas during your college days and since. You are dedicated to Freemasonry in every branch and have taken part in all of the degrees. You are writing a book of inspirational poems, and I read your weekly editorial, Little Lay Sermons, in the Kansas City Journal every Saturday with appreciation. Frank, you are just the one to do this. Frank Marshall thought for a time. He twisted the ends of his mustache. He played with the chain of his watch, looked at the time aimlessly, and finally said, No, definitely no. I do not think I am capable. I cannot do it, but I will listen to your idea if you want to tell me what this ritual should be like. You know there is no precedent. The Masonic ritual did not take form until the Grand Lodge of England was created. Some say it took all of history to evolve it, and you want me to write a ritual in what I presume is a short time. I can't do it, but I am interested in your thinking. It is all just formative and not clear as yet. It seems to me there should be 2 parts, or sections, or degrees. The Romans, you know, had a ceremony when a youth donned the toga of manhood. In the days of King Arthur, a squire was required to spend a night of reflection and dedication before receiving the touch of a sword on his shoulders as he entered into knighthood. Perhaps one section should be like that. Dramatize the years of growing as a youth to fulfill a dream, a sort of crown, a crown of youth. In these days, we are losing the old values, and yet they must be retained. What values and what virtues do you suggest? There was now a notable interest as Frank Marshall took mental notes and sensed the vision of what was to be in the enthusiasm of a younger man. I would think that first of all, a love of parents should be included. Then there should be some sort of religious emphasis that would appeal to boys of all faiths. I would like for this generation to retain a thoughtful consideration for others, say courtesy. Marshall was now becoming definitely interested. With the end of the war, we should encourage patriotism and remember the buddies found in the service. Call it comradeship if you like. This is what I am thinking, and there are other virtues also, like the fidelity of Jacques DeMolay and clean thinking and living. We might also stress the changing life pattern from youthful enthusiasm with a future filled with dreams. Until the sunset years come. How about it, Frank? Does this idea appeal to you? I am beginning to see something timeless, something beautiful as you talk. Did you say a crown of youth? Yes, that might be the basis, the beginning. But you first mentioned 2 degrees. What about the other? Land hesitated as the vision of what he wanted became increasingly clear to him. I want each boy to kneel at an altar. I want each boy to take a personal obligation and feel that it is just for him. The second part could be different, perhaps a tableau to dramatize the story of DeMolay. They were fascinated as I told them of his devotion to a cause and of his loyalty to his brethren. Yes, that might be it. Think of the drama, the stage settings, the pageantry, the opportunity for the boys to act out a part. I am simply not going to take no for an answer. Think about it and call me tomorrow. That night, Frank Marshall could not sleep. In his imagination, he saw a room filled with boys and a ceremony of initiation. Dimly, he became aware of the gargoyles of Notre Dame and the smoke ascending from a martyr's death at a stake before the cathedral. He forgot sleep and went to his desk. He called upon all his skills, and driven by the image of Frank Land saying, "You are the one to write this ritual for the order of DeMolay." He wrote throughout the night, and far into the morning. Just before noon, he reached for his phone. "Come over, Frank. I believe I have it for you. It is rough. It needs refinement of word and phrase, but I believe I have it." And so he had. It might be called genius or vision or rising to a challenge, but what he wrote has served as an inspiration for millions of young men. Weeks were spent polishing and refining. One of the DeMolay club members, Ted Little, called on him at his home one afternoon and found him swinging in a hammock with a fan in his hand and a pipe sending forth billowy clouds of smoke. Marshall made no attempt to get up but continued to gently swing as he enjoyed the motion and the shade of the tall oak tree supporting his swaying couch. His greeting was cordial and friendly. "Hello, Ted. Glad you stopped by." Then pointing to his pipe, he explained, "This is my pipeline to heaven." Sort of smoke signals. I need a touch of the infinite to give help as I write. As the manuscript drew to its final form, Frank Land hovered over each work and one day said, "There is something missing. Last night I watched my mother as she tucked my little sister into bed. There is something that tugs at my heart when I watch motherhood at its best. I want a prayer included that God will watch over them. Let's add a service that can be given at bedtime, say 9 o'clock, each time the fellows come together. Perhaps it could begin, 'Brethren, at this hour all over the land we love, mothers are bending over the beds of the children they love. Let us pause in our deliberations and offer a prayer for our mother. I think the boys should kneel, and even during a party or dance they should include this service.' A sort of interpolation. Day after day the script was reviewed, polished, and refined, until it reflected the meaning of a deep ritualistic experience by words and by action. Frank Land's own spiritual depth and sincerity radiated through the writing of Frank Marshall until both men were satisfied that this ritual would impress and inspire young men to live through the years under a dedicated devotion to God, to country, and to home. Additional services to open and close the chapter were written. The interpolation ceremony gained a place of importance. So, in the beginning of the Order of DeMolay, a ritual was written to begin its march through time, but there was not a single boy who had been initiated or obligated as a member. How could those who had not been initiated under this ritual confer the degrees of a ceremony on others? Where do you start when there is no reservoir of experience? Here Frank Land's gift of organization and love of the appropriate took over. The time had come to prepare his young men to receive the obligation of the ritual, and then conduct the ceremonies of initiation to others with dignity and beauty. During this time, the boys were aware that something unusual was taking place, but not one of them had seen or read the ceremonies. Some had not even heard of them until at a specially called meeting in late summer. Dad Land requested the opportunity of speaking. "For several months," he began, "we have had a fine group of young men meeting in the temple of the Scottish Rite of this city. We have enjoyed the building and each other. It has been a good fellowship. Now I propose that we go beyond this and add certain ceremonies which will give meaning to our group. Frank Marshall has written a ritual for our use. It has deep meaning. I do not want to force this upon you, but remember, if you accept this, we accept it, and there will be no avenue of retreat. You will be asked to take upon yourselves a solemn obligation by which you are to live from this time onward. Some of you who anticipated such a program have asked for permission to read the ceremonies of initiation and the obligation. I did not want to grant this request. I wanted each of you to experience something of the secrecy that shall always be a part of DeMolay. I assure you that there is nothing written that will embarrass you, nor is there anything to excite your mirth. There is no donkey to ride. There is nothing in a form of levity. The ceremonies are solemn to impress upon your minds truths of right living, now and in the years to come." The boys listened as this new venture of their club was explained. There was a sense of mystery and secrecy about it all that brought mingled emotions of enthusiasm for an unknown adventure and apprehension about what was to happen. One expressed his feeling by saying, "I'm jittery." Land had suggested, as he left the room where they had been meeting, that they remain as they were and then come into the auditorium as their names were called. There they would receive the obligation of a DeMolay. The first name called was Louis G. Lower, around whom the group had formed. The second was Gorman McBride, the first elected presiding officer. Then, in groups of 4, they took upon themselves the vows to be assumed through the years by some 3 million young men. All uncertainty vanished as each boy was called to enter the large auditorium to receive his obligation. The very setting carried the suggestion of being on the threshold of a program of deep and abiding importance. He saw, in the dim lighting of the room, an altar covered by a single white covering, without insignia, one corner of which had been placed several schoolbooks. Red and white carnations gave prominence to a worn Bible in the center of the altar, the same Bible given to Dad Land years before for perfect attendance at Sunday school. Surrounding the center of their attention were 7 lighted candles on tall wood standards, and in back of each candle stood a man wearing the white cap of a 33rd degree Mason. Each boy was asked to kneel, to place his hands on the scriptures before him, and to repeat the words of obligation as they were spoken by Dad Land. Somewhere in the room an organ played, and as each one in turn completed his vow, a chorus sang softly the verses of a hymn of dedication. Following his obligation, each boy was asked to rise, and if he had been elected or appointed to an office, he was conducted to the location in the room, his station, where he would function in rites and ceremonies of the new ritual. Those serving as the first full line of officers were Avril C. Tatlock, Master Counselor; Harry A. Carpenter, Senior Counselor; Louis G. Lower, Junior Counselor; William W. Lewis, Scribe; Harry C. Clark, Treasurer; Dallas H. Elmore, Senior Deacon; Richard M. Slater, Junior Deacon; Jack T. Harris, Senior Steward; Robert E. Baylor, Junior Steward; Richard M. Wakefield, Chaplain; Kenneth Miller, Sentinel; Ernest E. Hall, First Preceptor; Ralph Vance, Second Preceptor; Calvin P. Boxley, Third Preceptor; Burnett N. Ackenhouse, Fourth Preceptor; Ernest P. C. Moss, Fifth Preceptor; M. Harvey Walker, Sixth Preceptor; Merrill K. Dubach, Seventh Preceptor. Installation was to come later on September 16, 1919, but on this night they silently assumed the places designated for each one as the others seated themselves in chairs under the balcony of the great Gothic room. Dimness of lighting gave way to increasing light, and the first chapter room and the first officers of a DeMolay chapter came into focus and into being. Frank Marshall nodded to Frank Land, and his lips silently formed the words, "It is good, it will do."